Awesome. Thanks, Rob. And welcome, Lee and Drew. It's good to see you. Great to have you back. It's my pleasure to introduce Lee Brennan and Drew Jessup, who work at Sunday Roast. So Lee is the founder and creative director there. So he's great with putting the visual to all of your strategy and your purpose. And Drew is head of strategy as well. And he is really like the strategic mind between everything at Sunday Roast. And yeah, I think they've presented here before. So super excited to have you here and share all of your insights. And just a quick reminder to all of our participants to chat in any of your questions for Lee and Drew throughout the presentation. And because we'll be tracking again, you'll have another chance to win another participation prize a little bit later in our summit. So welcome, and I'm gonna pass you the mic.
Perfect. Thanks, Jenna. Yes, this is our second time presenting at a CosWalk Summit. Super excited to be back. We will dive right in. I will actually hand over the reins to Drew to kick us off, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. All right. Hopefully, if I share my screen, we can all see this. Lee, is that showing up for you?
It is, yep.
Okay, perfect. So today we're going to talk about securing more donations through user experience and web design. So specifically, we're chatting today about how users move their way through your website and how we can affect that behavior to get more donations through your site. So the first thing to start off with, we may not all be familiar with the term of UX, which again is user experience design. So we'll just start with a simple definition here. User experience design is about making the visitor's interaction with your website as smooth and enjoyable as possible. So the goal of it really is to remove barriers and guide visitors through the site towards making a donation. So why does UX matter for not-for-profit fundraising? Firstly, it matters because of engagement time on the site. So user experience design has a large component. It really affects how long people stay on the site. And if we don't have that in place, then we're going to lose visitors to the site, which obviously is not going to fare well for donations, which brings us to point number 2. User experience helps with donation completions. So we're all probably familiar with somebody coming to the site, getting to the donation page, and then leaving. User experience helps us to get to that donation quicker and limit decisions in the process, leading to more donations. And then 3, it helps us to create relationships with users. It's very much feelings-based and making people feel comfortable, delighted, and then ultimately returning to the site to make more donations in the future. And so we have a few usual suspects for cause-based organizations, which would include, charities. And these things are really what we're seeing being kind of the clear problems with user experience across some of the sites that we've seen in the industry as a whole. So if we have unclear user journeys, meaning how do we get a visitor to the site from point A to point B? And in most cases, that's going to be how do we get them from the homepage to making a donation? So if that's not clear, then we're usually going to lose people pretty quickly. So user journey would also be other things like making sure that a navigation is set up in a way that somebody can follow it seamlessly and intuitively. And then the second problem is slow load speeds. So you know, just perusing the web, I'm sure we're all familiar with, you know, getting to a site that loads rather slowly, and then ultimately you lose interest and you just exit the site. The third one being mobile optimization. So 58% of web usage today is mobile. And this does vary industry to industry, but for the most part, we're seeing in kind of not for profit space that 50% or more is really mobile usage. So if we have a desktop site that's not optimized for mobile, it's a really confusing and frustrating experience. And that leads to obviously people leaving the site. And then leaning into logic over feeling. So one of the components of user experience is really creating that feeling of credibility and trust in a brand. So oftentimes we're seeing that we'll let reading kind of trump feeling. So trying to explain why your organization is credible is not the best, not putting the best foot forward, because it forces people to have to read a lot more information rather than intuitively understand it. So usually that will lead us to things like getting to a call to action further down the page because we feel like we have to explain the organization, its goals, its mission first, rather than just evoking a feeling of credibility, of trust. And then the fifth one is confusing donation processes. So if we're not clear about what we want the user to do, if we're not clear about how they get there, if it's too many clicks, all of these things lead to users dropping off. So what do we do about that? We've got 6 non-negotiable principles of good user experience. So the first one is attention. So either good or bad, we're going to create an immediate connection or an immediate repulsion. And that's not even generally going to be about the website. That's probably going to be about the brand. The website is just going to be an extension of the brand. And we're really dealing with over the decades a attention span that is diminishing. So at the moment, our attention span is about 7 seconds, thanks in part to things like social media, but we have less attention span than a goldfish. So we really got to keep that in mind. We have to make a great first impression, and we've got to make things really clear. The second thing we need to do is we need to avoid frustration. So lean into common sense, make things simple, understand for yourself where you want the user to go, what you want them to understand, and then include clean, easy to follow navigation and strong calls to actions. And when we talk about calls to action, which we'll touch on quite a bit throughout this presentation, we mean the buttons on the site which inspire action, where we want users to go. And then building social clout. So using what we call trust signals to build credibility. In the not-for-profit space, we don't have the luxury of things like Trustpilot or Yotpo or some of these big review engines that we're seeing in things like e-commerce. So we have to look for different ways to build those trust signals. And ultimately, that's going to be just a social signal that, hey, you can trust this brand. They're a legitimate organization. And then I mentioned it before, don't be slow. So optimize the website for load speeds because we only have those 7 seconds. And I touched on mobile. So we'll go to the last one, which is the ACE formula. In our presentation last time, we touched on this, but strong copywriting is really an element of good user experience. So in any of the copywriting, you want to think of action, clarity, and empathy. So if we can create those three things in our copywriting, that will aid in the user experience across the site. So a couple of examples of just good elements of the non-negotiables. So like I said, the trust badges are not something we can't collect reviews as a not-for-profit, so we have to kind of create these for ourselves. This one's taken from Charity Water. So here we can see over 170,000 water projects funded in 29 countries and 19 million people being served. So that's an indication that, hey, other people have donated to this cause and you're in good hands. Obviously, you don't get to serving 19 million people without being a credible organization. So every not-for-profit has things like this. It might take some creativity and kind of storytelling to identify what these things are, but they should be front and center on the website. It doesn't take a lot of time to read this, and it just is a quick indication that this is a credible organization. The other thing is strong calls to action and clear messaging. So here we have an example, again, from Charity Water. 100% of your gift funds, clean and safe drinking water. And then they tell you right in here, what the issue is, what the impact is. So 700 million people are living without it. And they've got a really strong call to action. It's really not able to be missed. We'll go into this in a little more detail in future slides, but it's very clear what they want you to do here. And it's clear in the messaging what impact it has. So that kind of storytelling is what we'll want to strive for as well. And the last thing on this slide here, again, going outside the bounds of not-for-profits, the Amazon Buy Now button. This was actually something that was patented by Amazon, and they engineered it to get you to check out in the least amount of clicks possible. So we're trying to, we can't do this, obviously, but the principle here is that we want to get people to that donation page without them having to navigate through a bunch of different pages to get there. So a good rule of thumb is if we can get somebody to making a donation within 2 or 3 clicks, that's going to largely impact our conversion rates. So we want to talk about data-driven user experience benchmarks. And really there's 4 of them that we look at when we're working with clients to improve conversion rates on their sites. And the first one is a bounce rate. So you may have heard of this before, but essentially the way that you would calculate this is the percentage of traffic that leaves your site after only viewing one page divided by the total number of traffic. So this is something, if you don't have Google Analytics set up, it actually measures it for you. And it's a really good indication of how your user experience is functioning. So if we have a bounce rate of 50% or higher, that means there's something with what the user thought they were going to experience when they came to the site. A lot of the times what we're seeing is that people are coming through Google, through search engines. So either it's kind of different than they thought it was, and it's not what they were looking for, or the information might be kind of out of order and a little bit confusing for them, and maybe they don't know what it is that they're supposed to do. So 50% or higher is not good. What we want to shoot for is 40% or lower. And next is load speed. So this is taken from retail, so we're looking at e-commerce, but the principles really apply across the web. So 1 second delay in load time can impact conversion rates by up to 20%. Meaning if we're 1 second slower than our competitors, then they may have a 20% advantage in their donations. So a tool like Pingdom is one that we use. It's free. You can put your site into it and it'll give you a score. So what we're really looking for is 80% or higher. So it gives you grades across a few things like image sizes, how many redirects you have with your domains, how extensive and maybe convoluted your code is. All of these things can impact load speed, and most of them are something that we can affect pretty easily. And then the next one is mobile optimization. So 58% of global web usage is mobile. So tools like Browser Stack can help you to just understand what users are seeing across different devices, across different screen sizes. And really the rule of thumb is that these are the most popular desktop and mobile sizes across the board. So we'll want our site to function well at each of those 5 different breakpoints. And if we can do that, if we can create a good user experience for mobile, then you know, if we're looking at capturing another 50% of users. And if we don't have that, it's an extreme disadvantage. And then web traffic is the last one, which doesn't directly have anything to do with conversion, but it has everything to do with awareness and consideration. So when you look at a buyer funnel or in our case, a donor funnel, we're looking at going through 3 stages in this journey. So first is awareness. They have to be aware of our brand. Second is consideration. So they have to be, they have to kind of know the landscape, know that they want to donate with us, and we have to give them reasons why. And then the third is conversion. So they're actually making that donation. So as a rule of thumb, 500 visits per month is kind of where we want to get to before we start considering conversions. So it's kind of a chicken and egg situation. What came first, the web traffic or the conversion? Both are important, but that 500 visits per month really gives us a good indication of what's working and what's not. We can start to see bounce rates. We can start to see different indications of how the user experience is functioning. So if you're not yet at 500 visits per month, things like technical SEO, local SEO, and even paid ads could help get you to that point and have a better pool of understanding how user experience is functioning. So I will now hand it off to Lee.
Thanks, Drew. We are going to change gears slightly here for a minute, and hopefully bring it all back together as we work through this. How often have you said, wow, this looks so cool. I really want one of those. But what is it? What does it do? I know I have. But why do we do that? What pulls us in so quickly? Why are we so committed to wanting something before we have all the information? We're going to take a quick look at 2 products for a moment that provide the same solution. The first being Apple Vision Pro. It's a computer monitor displayed obviously through the headset throughout your office or living room or on a bus or anywhere you happen to be. It uses the space around you to be able to display your browsers, apps, calls, whatever you might be working on or doing at any time. But essentially, it is a computer monitor. It looks modern, it looks slick, a little futuristic. It's very intriguing. Let's compare that to a Dell computer screen. It looks good. has a sharp display. It's got good ratings. You can set it up in whichever room you want to and perform the same tasks on it as you can the Apple Vision Pro. But even just out of these two slides, which product do you want to know more about? Which product intrigues you the most? Which product evokes the most emotion within you? Even if you're an Apple hater, and I'm sure there are some of you out there, be honest with yourself, which one pulls you in the most? Now, two things. One, this may be an unfair comparison of products, and you may be correct. And two, why are we even talking about this right now? What does this have to do with this presentation? Apple are not only a master at designing products, but they are also a master of designing UX, user experience. They pull you in with their products and the way they display them, the way they talk about them. The journey they take you on when you visit the website is immersive and inspiring. But again, what's the point here? The point is, be more like Apple and less like Dell. Once you have a UX strategy or a structure to your website, you then have to lead people through it in the most optimized way. Tell compelling stories, evoke emotion through good design, and inspire people to make donations. And so here are some points we can use to try and accomplish this optimization. Good design is invisible. You cannot rely solely on well-written copy to grab people's attention and tell them everything they need to know. You must have a compelling visual story to grab people's attention. You have 7 seconds to do it, and so you need to do it well. Copy is important, as Drew mentioned, the ACE structure. Copy is obviously important, but you need to visually capture people that are visiting your website as well. A well-designed website builds credibility with its visitors. It shows you care, that you are invested in your cause, and that you are up to date. Excuse me. People generally don't read, so get your message across quickly. Your H1 tags and your above the fold content, meaning your main headline and whatever is within the browser that you can view when you land on your website, needs to give a clear story of who you are and what you want your visitors to do. Be consistent with your branding so that every touch point between your cause and your audience is recognizable. I'm talking color palette, typography, imagery style, logos, iconography, and the style that you use. Everything needs to be consistent. You need to be instantly recognizable with no questions about if your website is the same cause as your Facebook page. Storytelling. Be compelling. Pull at the heartstrings. Make it personal. Make it approachable and relatable. Again, 7 seconds is what you have to intrigue your users enough to learn more and make a donation. If you can be consistent in your branding and tell compelling stories, have a well-designed website, and show credibility and trust, this will decrease bounce rates, reduce those abandoned donations, and increase conversions. To try and emphasize these points, you might have seen it, Drew skip forward previously. So this is a famous quote and poster designed about typography, but it really applies to any form of design, especially web design as well. So good design is invisible, and bad design is everywhere. And so I just wanted to add that in there to emphasize what I've said. and use that to lead into looking at a couple of examples here in a second. In fact, next slide now, Drew, would be good. So looking at this example, mentioning no names, we visited this website to experiment with the website and the donation process. It wasn't a great experience. The first problem was that it took 3 clicks to actually even get into the site. It has an unsecured domain, and so this immediately killed any credibility. I know we're not talking too much about domains and hosting or anything like that, but in terms of building credibility, having a secure domain and allowing people to land on your website uninterrupted is a big first impression. Once the site loaded for us, there was not really any storytelling. There was no real direction. There were no clear calls to action. And so we were kind of left just wandering around the site, trying to figure out what they were about, what they wanted us to do, and where they needed us to go within the website. You can actually see clearly as well, talking about brand consistency, that the logo in the header and the logo used throughout the rest of the site is actually a different color yellow. And this matters. They're both yellow, great, but they need to be consistent. Once we eventually found the donation button further down the page, it then kicks you out to a PayPal page for your donations, which again decreased that trust and credibility with this particular organization. All in all, it took around 7 clicks just to get to the PayPal donation page. This is way too many, way too many. There was a lot of obstacles to overcome just to get to this page. It was very frustrating. And so all empathy that we had kind of just left the building. We were no longer interested in making a donation to this cause. It was not a great example of good user experience or emotional design. There's not really much there to capture me as a visitor coming to that website, and the whole process was very, very difficult to work through and understand. On the flip side of that, we'll go to a good example. Again, we are using charity water as the example. We've used these as a case study because we actually have dealt with charity water in the past, and we donate to them each year as part of our 1% for the Planet membership. So what do they do better here? Starting from the bottom, we'll work our way around these notes. So the first thing is that there is a clear call to action right above the fold, within that window. There's a clear call to action. Giving and donating is actually the only action. Even if you scroll down through the rest of this page, there are no other calls to action on this landing page. And the only thing that you can do is join today. So very clear, very prominent call to action. There is a trust badge and within the secure payment kind of small print underneath the donation box. Building trust, building credibility. As you go through that donation process, it doesn't kick you to any other pages. It keeps you right there on the page, and that form just reloads and you can enter all your information as required. A suggested amount of how much to donate is already pre-selected there, the $20. And then beneath the join today, it explains what that donation will accomplish. So being really clear in the messaging of not only we want you to do this, but this is why. This is the amount of people that you can help get clean water for this amount. Obviously is what this example is. Not only do they have a pre-selected amount, but they have a pre-selected frequency. So it's default to monthly giving, meaning users, when looking to donate here, have to actually think about it and then decide they only want to make a single donation. But having that monthly suggestion up front will help convert those users who are already primed to make those monthly donations. So then we get into the content itself. So we have a personalized story about, I believe that's Adane. I apologize if that's not how you pronounce that name. But it's his story. This 8-year-old boy, it's his story. It's about him. He is representing the lives that donators can affect and have a positive impact on. So we have a very simple story that's going to pull on the heartstring. It's going to pull you in. It's going to play with your emotion, and the image supports that story. So we don't have, there's a very clear story, a very clear theme. We're not looking at one image and then being told something different within that content. And then the final point, something that's very interesting and useful to do when building landing pages or donation pages. And if you go to any other, Charity Water specifically have a range of different landing pages for different donations, and every single page has the navigation removed. So not only do we have a single clear call to action in Join Today, but all of the focuses are removed. You can't even navigate through the rest of the website because they are being very clear as to what they want you to do. So we have a very clear UX here, a very clear message, all the information we need. Emotion is built through the case study of Adane, and the clearest of calls to action to follow. Branding is super on point with the proper brand yellow being used across the board. I can complete a donation here in less clicks than it took to simply find the right donation page on the previous example. So minimizing those clicks, making it easy, simple to get users to where you want them to be. So we have covered a lot of information in terms of user experience, the strategy behind that, how then to try and implement that in an emotional, design-friendly way. But what are some of the key takeaways from this? We have a list of some takeaways that we want to kind of just highlight. The first being the importance of user experience. Try to follow what we have laid out for avoiding the usual suspects of bad user experience and apply the non-negotiables for good user experience. Work through those, make those changes on your website. Second is build credibility. Don't rely on copy alone. Build that visual credibility, brand consistency, interesting and intriguing imagery and content, trust badges. Don't let people have to read paragraphs of information to understand what you want them to do. Again, I know we've said it a couple of times, you have 7 seconds to make an impression. We need to make them count. Third is emotional storytelling. Make it personal. Evoke emotion. Use a case study. Have it all mean something to the visitors coming to your site. Drive their emotions to join your cause and get behind you with those donations, which leads us to point 4, which is clear, actionable calls to action. Keep them high up the page, above the fold if possible, and make them easy to navigate. Don't let them get lost within your content or further down the page and make people have to find them. Make them up front and ready to go. And then final takeaway here is simplify your donation process. Embed forms directly on the website. Again, have those trust badges. Have a frequency and amount of donation pre-selected. Limit the amount of clicks to find and receive those donations for people visiting your website. Thank you for being here and listening and participating in today's summit. As part of our involvement here today, you will receive, I know Rob mentioned it, you will receive a guide from us. Ours is Purpose Unleashed, a guide to transform your brand and ignite growth. So you can keep an eye out for that coming your way. And then I believe we have time now for a Q&A. So if there are any questions, and work through those.
Awesome. Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, I'll be sending out your resource next week. So Lee or Drew, do you have access to the Q&A? Are you able to read through those, or do you want me to read them for you?
We do. I believe. Actually, I'm in presenter mode, so I can't really pull it up right now.
Oh, gotcha. Cool. Yeah, I can read them for you. We've got about a few minutes here, so yeah, just as we digest, I would encourage all of our attendees, if you can just think through the takeaways. You know, what is that one session? What is that one tip that you're going to start putting into practice? I think that's really important as we just think about Rob's tip on taking one key takeaway to actually put into practice. So think about any feedback or questions, and I'll get started with Kayla's question. So with donation forms, you have the option to have all of the fields on one, typically very long page, or have a series of shorter pages, which is preferable. And there are more clicks for going through the shorter style pages, but the long donation page is super intimidating. What does research show is best?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So basically we're talking about short versus long donation pages. I think what we've touched on here is that we can get to the point quicker, that leads to better conversion rates. So across industries, you've seen kind of the dawn and almost the end within a few years of things like long scrolling landing page. Some industries refer to them as like video sales landing pages. That's an overwhelming amount of content for users to scroll through. There's kind of an invisible line, I think, with how much do we need to show people in order to build that credibility and trust, and then get them to that specific action. So really, in what we're trying to convey here is that less is more. So we'd always be advocates for clarity and simplicity and getting people to that action first. So things that help with that are, you know, user experience, all the things we've chatted about today, but also, you know, the visual design, just creating this feeling of credibility and trust without having to say it. And I think when we get into longer pages, longer donation pages, we're looking at, you know, we're saying so much because we think we have to prove a lot. And that's one of the voids that good design, good user experience can fill for not-for-profits.
Right. Yeah. And is it like your experience, like how do orgs like go about with the amount of fields? Like it's generally like understandable that like if they can consolidate the amount of questions asked, right? Like to maybe try to streamline that process a little bit.
Yeah.
Fields that people are answering.
Yeah, the less clicks, the less decisions, the better. But obviously there is a threshold there with, you know, we have to share the important information, but not too much information. So it's finding that balance and really testing which way works better for your organization, because it's not really as cut and dry as saying like this is the hard fast rule that works all the time. It's really about you know, testing what works and what doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. There are a few other questions, such as Lori's, about any suggestions for improving the site speed resources on how to improve site speed.
Do you want to take that one, Lee?
Sorry, I was actually just typing out an answer to Brendan's question. So
Okay.
I missed it, but let me see.
Oh, yeah, I can take it. So it's just about how to improve site speed or resources for how to do that. So one of the biggest culprits for site speed is having your images be too big. Oftentimes we'll see that this is kind of getting into technical details, but we can downsave images and still have the clarity not be impacted. And so web resolution is something that we should be looking at for this. So for instance, if you download an image that is 20 megabytes and you put it on your site, that's going to impact your load speed. So if we downsave that for more of a web resolution, we should be able to get it significantly lower. So that's one of the things that we look to do for all of our sites, is just make sure we're not uploading anything that's too big. Video is the same. And then gets into more technical details. This is probably dependent more on where your site's built. So some platforms treat things differently. WordPress is one that we have a little more control over, but just making sure that we're not putting so much code in the top of a website, because search engines will reference that and docky points for it. So those are kind of the two big ones. And then an easy one that you can tackle quickly is if we have what's called a 301 redirect. So this is kind of on the domain side, and sometimes we can influence this through the actual site itself. But if there's a page that is linking out to another page, so if you say, cosvox.com/webinar, and it immediately points you over to another page with a different URL, that would be called a 301 redirect. And again, search engines don't love that. So oftentimes we'll see, maybe there was content that was relevant on a site 6 months ago that's not anymore, but it still gets web traffic. And so it'll start to point people to their page. That's good for navigation and making sure that people get to relevant information on your site. But at the same time, after a while, you're going to want to shut that off. And it's one of the things that will impact your load speeds too.
Awesome. Thanks for just walking us through that, Drew. And thank you both, Lee and Drew, for this fantastic presentation. I think, in the nonprofit space, we're very concerned about, reaching our audience, but the technicality around like the technical stuff, like, the website part can be, either like, overwhelming, or we're just not like in that space a lot. So I think that all these tips will be really helpful. And as a reminder to everyone, I'll be sending their slides to you next week. If you want to get in touch with Sunday Roast, I'm just going to put in the link to their website. Go there, check them out, and reach out if you have any questions. I'm sure they'd love to maybe follow up. Or if you have your contact information, Lee and Drew, you can drop that in the chat as well. And please, everyone, share your warm thanks to Lee and Drew. Thank you again so much.
Yeah, thanks for having us.